Hello, welcome to the Carlow Show, where we talk about my favorite things, but it also be yours too. I am your host, Joan Smith. She is my co-host, Anna Sproul, and today we are joined by Pittsburgh chef and restaurateur Kevin Sousa. How you guys doing?
Great. How are you today, Joan? Thanks for having me.
I'm good.
Let's just hop into the questions. I'm going to start the timer. Okay. So first question, how are you and other local chefs doing during the pandemic?
I think all things considered, we're doing all right. Personally, our businesses, not really, there's a lot of gray area. We don't know what's going to happen in the long term. So we're just trying to stick together and figure out the legislation that's happening and how we can get a hold of, the funds that are out there that are available, get to make sure our people stay paid.
So speaking of the pandemic, like what inspired you to give away bread, like during the pandemic, giving it to people?
I mean, it's just one of those things that, breaking bread it's a gesture of like community and being a part of something. And I just, it was like 2 days after the shutdown and I just started baking bread and I realized that I was pretty good at it. And that there were probably people in the community that didn't have enough food and didn't have access to, a car or the bus to go to the food bank. So we just, we put it out there on our channels up here in Allentown through some of the community groups on Facebook. And yeah, so, I mean, it was, to answer your question, I think it was just a gesture of, trying to feed people, because that's what I do. That's how I express myself.
That's awesome.
While we're in the inspiring side, what inspired you to be a chef in total?
So what's inspired me to be a chef? Well, I grew up in a restaurant. So up until I was about 6, the restaurant burned down. But I grew up in the kitchen, hanging out with the dishwashers and the cooks. And my family was in the restaurant business. I always said that I wasn't going to get in the restaurant business. I went to art school after high school. I went to Pitt, and then I went to Art Institute Pittsburgh. The whole time while I was in art school, I was cooking at like hoagie places and pizza shops and like short order cooking and paying my way through college. And I realized that I was better at cooking and I enjoyed the kitchen environment more than I enjoyed sitting and drawing. And so I kind of made the switch when I was about 25, and I didn't really look back.
How did the restaurant burn down?
Pardon? I think it was just like an electrical fire. It was just unfortunate. No one got hurt. It happened at night. I think it was like 1981, showing my age.
Jones, can I ask a question here? Do you mind if I jump in for a second? Kevin, you said you started drawing, and then what are there things from your art training that went into your cooking now, like the creative aspect of it? Or
yeah, I think that when I had my first path that I thought was where I was headed when I was right out of high school is I wanted to be a tattooer. I wanted to do tattoos for a living. So I kind of started to focus on that kind of art, which is repetition, drawing, a lot of like studio work, a lot of like table work. And it frankly didn't inspire me as much as the kitchen did. And the kitchen was more fast paced and exciting. And like, I'm kind of high energy. Mm-hmm. And so even though drawing and doing tattoos in theory is like a quote unquote cool job, it's still essentially a cubicle. Like it's office work. Yeah. And so I didn't really realize that cooking could be a really great creative outlet until I was probably about 3 years into my career, when I took over a restaurant called Kaya, which is part of the Big Burrito restaurant group. And they allowed me to do whatever I wanted. And then from there, it just kind of, it developed.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry, Jones.
Has life changed after you've been on several different magazines, won several different awards, and even being on the news?
No, life hasn't really changed. Occasionally, yeah, people will stop me on the street and ask me about the restaurants or ask me, what I'm up to. Aside from that, we've been, when I say we, I mean, because everyone thinks that the chef does everything, runs the restaurant, cooks every meal, does all the prep. It's really like a team of about 20 of us. So, we've been lucky enough to get a lot of good press, some bad press, but it's all worked out to our advantage. So, yeah.
I'm sure you met a ton of interesting people through your career. Who are some of the most, what's your favorite person you've ever met that you would be able to meet?
Well, I mean, the one that comes to mind first, and it's mostly because he's no longer with us, is, I was lucky enough to do the Anthony Bourdain show. And so he filmed Parts Unknown in Pittsburgh a few years ago, and he filmed with us in Braddock. We had dinner with him and John Fetterman, the mayor, and Franco Harris, and I cooked for them in the restaurant before it was finished. We didn't even have a kitchen. And the following day, Anthony Bourdain came back out to Braddock, and we did a whole day of shooting at the Cary Furnace, the old steel mill, the abandoned steel mill, and I got to know him pretty well. And very little of that footage actually made it to the show. And then a few months after the show aired, he actually passed away. Yeah. So that was a big one, because his breakthrough book was right when I was starting to seriously cook in the late 90s. Kitchen Confidential came out, and I remember when I read it, it was pretty influential.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought of going to a bigger city to open up a restaurant?
I did when I was younger, right before I met my wife, my ex-wife at the time. She was a server, and she was in college finishing her degree to become a Pittsburgh public school teacher. Right before I met her, I had thought about moving to New York City and getting started in the restaurant business there. But once I met her, and we eventually were married with kids, that kind of was not really the direction that I wanted to go anymore. So, and Pittsburgh is my hometown. I did a lot of traveling when I was younger, and I ended up back here. So, short answer to your question, yes, but really not so much.
Have you ever thought of making a cookbook?
It's funny you should mention that. I'm going to get off camera for 1 second, and I'm going to show you something. So, my fiance, I've been talking about writing a book for probably 2 years, and my fiance, hold on. So I said I want to write a book, and I want to use an old typewriter, and literally just got this for me. It's an old Smith & Corona, and I'm actually, as soon as I get ribbon, I'm probably going to start. And I don't know that it'll be a cookbook per se, but it'll be a book, and there'll be food. It'll be relative to food, but I don't think it will just be recipes. It'll be more of a narrative of kind of topics.
Do you have any trouble finding ribbons for that typewriter?
Actually, it's surprisingly easy. I guess back in the day, they actually used to make things that were universal, and they stayed universal. And yeah, it's pretty. They were really easy to find on eBay, Amazon, everything.
You've opened up several different restaurants, from a hot dog shop to an Arlington beverage club. Is there one concept that's your favorite?
I have to say that not because you brought it up, but just because the food was fun and the environment was fun, and I loved Station Street hot dogs. And eventually we did much more than hot dogs, and if I could do it over again, I probably would redo that one. And knowing what I know now, I think it would be more successful. And I would have. We ran out our lease. We didn't have enough support in our organization to kind of keep it going.
So for all the kids out there that are watching that want to be a chef, do you have any like words for them that
I
you
do.
think?
I would say instead of spending your or your parents' hard-earned money on culinary school, I spent my hard-earned money. I just paid off my loans a few years ago. Go and work at a really good restaurant that you like to eat in. And if they're not hiring, say you'll work for free, and work for free and show that you really want to work there. And within a week, I guarantee they will offer you a job. And then work your way up from there, and you'll learn every single station. For example, we have a kid at Superior Motors. He started with us. He was 18. He had never had a job. He didn't really know much about food. He started off as a busboy, and he washed dishes, and then he slowly started to show interest in the kitchen. He started plating desserts and then making salads, and now he's one of our lead line cooks. And he's 21, and he just got an apartment and a car, and he's turned it into a career.
That's awesome.
So we are about to run out of time. I'm just gonna stop the timer right now. So we would like to end the podcast with a thing called the speed round. Speed round is we're gonna ask you five questions in 30 seconds.
Okay.
So, ready? It's really simple questions.
Okay.
First thing that comes to mind.
All right.
What's your favorite snack?
Doritos.
What's your favorite movie?
Big Lebowski.
What's your favorite sports team?
Not a fan of sports at all.
What's the favorite vacation you went on?
Oh, that's a tough one. Prague.
Do you have any pets? If so, what kind?
I do. I have a border terrier named Cheddar.
Time.
Did he do it? Was it 30 seconds, John?
Kind of.
I gave you a non-answer for one, but I couldn't think of a sports team. I don't watch sports. So.
Oh yeah, me too. Although I just started watching for fun the Last Dance. Turns out it's interesting, even though I don't like watch basketball. Yeah.
Yeah. And competitive marble rolling, I would like to start watching.
Okay, so that will be the end of the show. Thank you so much for Kevin being here.
Yeah,
Thank
of course.
you, Ms. Sproul, for being the co-host. I'd like to have a special thank you for my mom for helping me get Kevin and helping me think of questions. And yeah, any last words to the people, Kevin?
No, thanks a lot for having me, and I hope that everyone is staying safe and ready to get back into society soon.
Awesome.
Okay, end it. Stay safe. Wear your mask. Peace.
Thanks.